My husband wants to go on a gaycation with his brother-in-law to Ibiza. How do I handle this? I honestly didn't think I'd ever be posting something like this, but here we are. So, my husband and I have been married for about 16 years. We've got a pretty stable life, decent careers. Our family's doing well despite the cost of living struggles in the UK, and we've got 2 boys, aged 15 and 10. Up until Sunday, I thought everything was going great. Sure, we have our usual disagreements, but nothing that felt like it would crack our marriage. We've always had a pretty good relationship, with some healthy exploration in our intimacy, but that's for another time. Anyway, this past Sunday, after I dropped the boys off at their friend's place, my husband pulled me aside. He asked if we had the house to ourselves, and if I had a minute to talk. I said yes, and then he sat me down and showed me a printed poster about an orgy. He started explaining what he called a gaycation, which is a term I had never heard before. Apparently, it's where straight men go on vacation to places like Ibiza, filled with sun, sand, and booze, and become gay during their time there. The catch, though, is that it doesn't count because, as he put it, what happens on a gaycation stays on a gaycation. I was totally stunned. I didn't know what to say. I felt so mortified, especially when he told me he was planning to go with his brother-in-law to Ibiza next year to experience this for himself. When he finally let me speak, I asked him straight up, "Are you gay?" I wasn't angry, I was just trying to get clarity. He immediately reassured me, swearing he wasn't, that he's still 100% attracted to women, and of course, he still loves me and our boys. But I was still left wondering, maybe he's bi? So I asked if that might be the case. He got defensive right away, insisting that what he's describing isn't about being bi. He went on and on about how this gaycation thing allows straight men to experience gayness without actually being gay. And somehow, he compared it to going to an aquarium, observing gayness, but not really becoming part of it. He was adamant that he's not interested in men's bodies at all, but he still felt the need to experience this, whatever it was. At that point, I told him that I was really uncomfortable with this idea. Even if he were bi, this would feel like cheating to me. But, of course, he kept insisting that that's the beauty of the gaycation. It's just something men do. It's not cheating, it's just an experience. And honestly, I couldn't make sense of any of it. I left the room because I just couldn't process it. Later that day, at dinner, we spoke again. I asked him why he wanted to do this if he's not gay. He went on about how he's curious about how gay men live differently from straight men. He even went as far as saying that once you go on a gaycation, you just have to surrender to it, mind, body, and soul, or else you'd be destroyed. I couldn't understand what he was talking about. He spoke so matter-of-factly that it made me question my own reality. And then he dropped the bombshell. He's doing this, and he's a bit late to it. He even said this is something straight men do all the time, and he's just one of the last to experience it. I told him that if he loved me, there was no way he could go through with this. If he did, the marriage would be over. After that, we didn't really speak much more that day. Since then, he stopped bringing it up, but the whole situation is still eating at me. And it's been affecting him too. He didn't go to work on Monday and only went for half a day yesterday. He looks absolutely miserable, and I'm not sure how to feel. I don't think he's fully gay, but I can absolutely believe he might be bi. However, I think it's crucial for us to talk about this in a healthy way, not around the idea of some weird sex holiday in Ibiza. I still don't know how to address this, and I'm lost. Has anyone ever known straight guys who go on these gaycations and come back to being straight? That just doesn't seem like a thing that happens. I'm completely out of my depth here, and I'm honestly terrified of what's going on. I haven't talked to his sister yet. I don't even know how to break it to her. I just needed to vent here because I honestly don't know what else to do. Update. Wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up like this. After reading the responses, I think it's become clearer to me what's going on. The marriage is over, one way or another. In a way, I think I was in denial myself. I reached out to my sister-in-law, his sister, and when I first told her, she flipped out. She called me a liar and even accused me of trying to steal her husband. She hung up, but then called me back to apologize. She's in shock, and honestly, I'm still in shock too. I've made arrangements for my parents to look after the boys, and I'm going to meet with them tomorrow to talk about everything. I also texted my husband and told him he needs to make arrangements to stay somewhere else. He won't be sleeping here tonight, and I've packed a bag for him. It feels like the decision's been made, and I've got my answers. Thank you to everyone who gave advice and support, especially one commenter who really gave me the reality check I needed. P.S. I saw some comments about the aquarium analogy. I'll explain it as best as I can. There's an aquarium in the UK called the Deep. At the end of it, there's a tunnel that goes underneath the fish tank, so you're walking under it. It's an immersive experience, I guess, but to my husband, he compared it to this gaycation. Straight men can observe gayness up close, but never actually enter the water, i.e., never become gay. It's a bizarre analogy, but that's how he explained it. Anyway, thank you for all the support. So, when I last posted, I mentioned I contacted my husband to tell him he wouldn't be staying at home tonight and that a bag was packed for him. As you can probably imagine, we had a massive argument. I won't go into all the details, but now I'm 100% certain that at the very least, he's bi, and maybe even entirely gay. We've had our disagreements in the past, but I've never seen him act so childish before. He threw a huge tantrum, screaming at me, telling me I don't understand the gaycation, which, by the way, I absolutely despise that term now. He even accused me of being homophobic for not letting him participate in this cultural exchange with the gay community. A lot of you advised me to ask him how he would feel if the roles were reversed, so I asked him straight up, would it be okay if I went away and slept with other men for that week? He got so angry and offended, saying that it was completely different. According to him, a gaycation means nothing, and what happens on the gaycation stays on the gaycation, so it doesn't really count. But if I did the same thing, it would be straight up cheating. So I decided to turn it back on him. I said, no, but you see, what happens in Manchester stays in Manchester. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't count. It's like bird watching, and I think it actually got through to him. He went silent for a moment and then started crying. He admitted that the thought of me being with another man was tearing his heart apart, but then he said, relationships need sacrifices, and while sobbing, he agreed that when he goes on his gaycation, I could have 1 week in Manchester to do whatever I want. He didn't want me to, but he reluctantly agreed, calling it fair in a twisted way. I told him to get out of my house. Thankfully, he left without putting up a fight. Now, I know this part is petty, but I drained the joint bank account. It's legal in the UK so that he couldn't use the money against me. About an hour later, my mother-in-law, Emile, called me, screaming down the phone, calling me a cheating whore, saying I was awful, asking about the kids, and so on. When I finally calmed down enough to speak, I just told her, ask your son about the gaycation. At first, she got really angry, but I insisted, no, just ask him about the gaycation. He'll explain. She called me a joke and hung up. Later that evening, I got another call from her, and this time she was in tears. She apologized profusely, and I told her she didn't need to be the one apologizing. She was so upset that she passed the phone to my father-in-law, FIL, who, while he was speaking calmly, I could tell he was furious. He also apologized, and it was clear he'd overheard the conversation about the gaycation. When he asked my husband about it, my husband initially said it was nothing, but then went on to explain how it's a modern thing men do and repeated the whole speech about how men must surrender to the gaycation. My father-in-law told him to leave and said if he didn't, they'd call the police. They didn't care where he went, but he wasn't staying there. While I was on the phone with FIL, my husband tried calling me, but I ignored it. FIL said he was so sorry for me and assured me they were on my side in all this. I told them to be there for their daughter, because it sounded like my brother-in-law, BIL, might be involved too, something my husband hadn't told them. FIL, clearly beyond angry, said he had to go. After the call, I received a strange, rambling text from my husband. He said I'd abused the gaycation to destroy his marriage and his life, and again suggested I and his parents were homophobic for doing this. I told him we'd talk when he grew up, then blocked his number. I took the day off work today to get the locks changed, which cost me £500, but I don't care. At least I know he won't be coming back. I'm looking into how to proceed with the divorce, and that's where we'll go from here. As for my brother-in-law, I still haven't met with my sister-in-law, SIL. She's been in a complete state and has taken this way worse than I have for reasons that'll become clear soon. We're hoping to meet tomorrow, but in the meantime, we talked on the phone. I could overhear her conversation with her husband, as she had him on speaker and muted her phone. He had just gotten home. She told him to come home early, saying there was an emergency, and she asked him, "Can you explain what a gaycation is?" She told me later that she was hoping he would either look confused or just be like, "What?" or something along those lines. Instead of reacting the way she expected, my brother-in-law, BIL, just sat her down and calmly explained that a gaycation is a new trend where straight men travel to gay hotspots and engage in gay sex acts. But, he said, it doesn't actually count because there's no emotional investment involved. He went on to explain that what happens on a gaycation stays on the gaycation, like writing down angry thoughts and putting them away in a drawer. You never have to see them again. The whole time, my sister-in-law, SIL, was in tears, trying to understand, while he kept repeating the same points my husband made. He even said that once the gaycation starts, it's impossible to resist, and men must surrender or be destroyed. It was honestly bizarre. At one point, I started wondering if they were speaking to a dominatrix or someone with a similar role. Are there even male dominants? Because surely neither of them could be making this up on their own. I don't want to go into the specifics of what was discussed, out of respect for her, but it became clear to me that my BIL is into sissy hypno-porn, and at times, he seemed to confuse that with the idea of a gaycation. There was this one surreal moment when my SIL was still trying to process everything, sobbing as he explained, in the most genuine and matter-of-fact way, that for most men, a gaycation is either a one-time experience or something they do annually. But, he added, some men go on the gaycation for years, and others never returned because they use hypnosis and mind control to turn into totally feminized men with a permanent pseudo-gay state of mind. My SIL, almost in disbelief, asked if a man willingly taking part in sex acts with another man made him gay. He said no, because that's the beauty of the gaycation. You can engage in gay acts without becoming part of the wider gay life experience. At this point, SIL asked if the sissy stuff was what he wanted, and he said no, not long-term. He was adamant that all straight men do this at some point, but she wouldn't understand because she's a woman. That's when the homophobia accusations came up again. It seems like that marriage is over, too. The whole situation ended when my SIL said to him that he had a choice to make. Either he leaves the house or she does. He tried to argue that there was no need for a choice, because the gaycation, in his view, allows him to keep his marriage intact. He insisted it doesn't count. In the end, the only good thing he did was leave. Afterwards, I spoke to SIL, and I'm still completely shocked. I can't understand how our lives got turned upside down so suddenly, in such a bizarre and embarrassing way. She's gone to her parents for support, and I'm left wondering, what did we do to deserve this? Why did it all have to happen like this? Update. Following some advice I've received, I'm going to start looking through devices and bank statements to see if I can find any solid proof of cheating. Once I have that, I'll figure out how to explain to the boys why their father won't be coming home. I spoke to my other sister-in-law, my husband's older sister, and gave her a less detailed version of what happened. She asked her husband about it, and thankfully, he was deeply confused. However, he mentioned that about 2 years ago, at a birthday party, my husband and BIL had approached him about signing up for some online boot camp related to BDSM and cross-dressing. He thought they were joking and told them to fuck off, so he never really gave it another thought. The fact that this has been going on for so long makes me feel physically ill. Now on to the next story, story 2. AITA for wanting to disinvite my fiancé's childhood best friends from our wedding after she drunkenly confessed her love for him at my bachelorette party. I'm Emma, 23F, and my fiancé, Dan, 28M, and I are scheduled to get married next month at a destination wedding. Last night was my bachelorette party, and I invited my closest family and friends, along with some of Dan's family and his childhood friend, Claire, 27F. To give you some context, Dan and I met when I was 19 years old. Our fathers are business partners and have been close friends since I was in high school. One evening, Dan's family invited mine over for a party at their house. That's when we first met. I was immediately attracted to him, but I was aware of the age gap, so I didn't think I had a chance. Later that night, he was outside in his backyard, smoking alone, and my sister dared me to go talk to him. I did, and a year later, we started dating. Dan and Claire have been friends since childhood, and their families are very close. From the start, Claire was extremely kind to me and expressed a desire to be best friends. At first, I found it a little strange, since she didn't really know me, but I didn't think much of it because she was dating Dan's best friend, Brad, 28M. We never became best friends because I already had a solid friend group and don't trust easily, but Claire was always respectful and never crossed any boundaries. Last summer, Dan proposed to me during a trip to Belize. After we made the announcement, everyone congratulated us, but Claire's reaction was different. The next day, she sent Dan a text, just to him, not in our group chat, saying she was happy for him. Since then, she's been a little distant with me, but I didn't pay much attention. I have my own life and friends, so it didn't bother me too much. About 6 months ago, Claire and Brad broke up, but they didn't give any specific reasons, only that they wanted to go back to being friends and find happiness with other people. Now, fast forward to last night. My bachelorette party was held in a suite at a popular hotel in Miami, where I live, planned by my older sister and Dan's sister and 26F. The night was absolutely amazing, and I had so much fun. We were all drinking and having a blast. At one point, I decided to go to the bathroom, but as I got closer to the door, I heard voices. Then I realized it sounded like someone was crying. It was Claire talking to, and I overheard something that made my stomach drop. Claire was telling and that this should be her wedding, that she couldn't understand why Dan would want to be with someone like me when it was always supposed to be the two of them. She even said she had always loved him. I was completely shocked and sobered up instantly. Hearing this was like a punch in the gut. I had no idea that Claire felt this way, and I couldn't believe she was saying these things, especially at my bachelorette party. Now I'm left with a tough decision. My wedding is just a month away, and I'm seriously considering disinviting Claire. I haven't told Dan yet because I'm still trying to process everything. On the one hand, I feel like I have every right to remove her from the guest list. After all, she's admitted to having feelings for my fiancé, and I can't imagine having her there, knowing how she feels. On the other hand, disinviting her could cause drama, especially considering how close their families are. So, Reddit, would I be the asshole if I uninvited Claire for my wedding? I just don't know if I can go through with it, but I also don't want someone who's in love with my fiancé at the celebration of our marriage. Let me know what you think, please. Update. First of all, thank you so much to everyone who reached out with advice and support. You guys are amazing, and I appreciate all the kind words and suggestions. Just to clarify, I referred to Claire as my fiancé's best friend because I wasn't sure what else to call her. Maybe childhood friend would be more accurate? Honestly, they've never really used that title for each other, but that's how I see their relationship. Now, for the update. After I overheard what was said, my initial reaction was to confront Claire, but I knew if I made a scene with all of our family and friends there, it would spiral out of control. I still wanted to enjoy my night, so I stayed calm and kept listening. Some of you were wondering what and had to say about all this. After she helped calm Claire down and explained that this wasn't the time or place for this kind of confession, and told Claire that Dan would never forgive her if she ruined my bachelorette party. She also suggested that Claire leave and get herself together. I was just about to walk in at the same time they were walking out, so I acted like I hadn't heard anything and asked if everything was okay. Claire looked down, wiped her face, and said she wasn't feeling well and might need to cut the night short. I honestly didn't argue with her and even walked her to the door because, seriously, what else was I supposed to do? After she left, I pulled an aside and told her I'd overheard everything, and apologized that I had to hear it and said she would reach out to Dan to handle it, but I told her I didn't want her to. I wanted to hear it from Dan directly. Some of you also wanted to know why Claire said it should have been her. Did something happen between Claire and Dan that I didn't know about? I knew nothing had happened between them, but I still had to ask. So I asked if Claire and Dan had ever been together or had any sort of romantic history. and said that, to her knowledge, there was nothing like that. Apparently, their mothers used to joke when they were teens about how they could be related if Dan and Claire ended up together. And said it never went anywhere because Dan was never interested in her romantically. She added that Claire is beautiful, but Dan has a type, and Claire just isn't it. I wanted to ask more, but I decided to wait until I talked to Dan for further clarification. After that, I tried to push the situation out of my mind and continued the party, even speaking to Dan briefly before bed. The next morning, I posted on Reddit before doing anything drastic. Dan came home later that evening, and once he had settled in and relaxed, I told him everything that had happened. To say he was furious is an understatement. He was absolutely livid. I asked him if there had ever been anything between him and Claire that I didn't know about. I wanted to know if they had ever been intimate or if she had ever confessed her feelings to him. He made it clear that there has never been anything more than friendship between him and Claire. He told me that they had kissed once back in high school, but it was during a game of Spin the Bottle, and everyone had kissed multiple people, including Brad. He assured me that Claire had never confessed any kind of love for him before and was confused because, in the past, he had played a role in getting Claire and Brad together. Dan wanted to call Claire right then and there, but I told him to calm down first because getting upset would only make things worse. I want to make it clear that Dan isn't mad that I overheard the conversation or that I'm upset about it. He's hurt and feels betrayed by Claire's actions, especially since it happened at my bachelorette party, where everyone was supposed to be there to support me. Dan can be really protective of me, and he doesn't like hearing anything negative about the people in our lives, especially when it involves our relationship. I told him that I felt uncomfortable with Claire attending our wedding now. I want our wedding to be a celebration with people who are genuinely happy for us and supportive of our relationship. That evening, Dan texted Claire, telling her he needed to talk to her. She replied, saying she would let him know when she was home. So now we'll see how that conversation goes. He also invited Brad over for dinner tonight to discuss everything, as things feel off between all of us. A lot of you have been asking about Claire and Brad's relationship and whether Claire used him to make Dan jealous. So, we'll all be present when Claire has the conversation with Dan to see what she has to say for herself. Since Thanksgiving is just around the corner, I'll update you guys after the conversation takes place, and if anything new comes to light. Just give me some time to get through the holiday. Also, I have a wedding dress fitting tomorrow, and I'm so excited. I might even make a collage to show you guys my reference photos. Happy holidays, everyone!